Hi everyone, my name's Braden. Welcome to 1,000 Lives Book Reviews. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time now, ever since as many of you know, my first love is fiction and writing fiction, reading fiction, absorbing fiction. So I thought, hey, well, what better way to express that than to start a book review YouTube channel, a booktube channel. I think that's what they're called. My family and I recently moved to Edinburgh, Scotland, for me to do a PhD in psychotherapy, and so I'm kind of a little bit disconnected from my reading community back home in Canada. So this might be a good way to also just keep me connected with people back home, what they're reading, what their interests are, what their thoughts on my thoughts are, and kind of just keep the conversation going. Why 1,000 Lives book reviews? Well, good question. The name 1,000 Lives actually comes from George R.R. Martin's book series, A Game of Thrones. I'm a massive Game of Thrones fan. Anyway, this week I chose to read a newer book that just came out. One of my favorite Norwegian authors. His name is Karl Ove Knausgaard. Karl Ove Knausgaard. It's called The Morning Star. I was first introduced to Knausgaard actually over quarantine, where I was, reading a lot of books because staying at home, not doing much during the pandemic. And I decided I was going to read through all of My Struggle. I was going to read A Time for Everything. I was just going to read all of the books that he's really written, the major books at least. And reading My Struggle was this really immersive experience where it's like you really are, and it's similar to In Search of Lost Time in this way, you really are almost in the mind of this person. It feels like every moment, every next chapter of their life is something that you're kind of vicariously experiencing with them. And so there's this kind of intimacy that develops between the reader and the author, which makes it really a special experience. I think I remember specifically in the last book called The End. It's a very long book. It's about 1,000 pages long. Halfway through, Knausgaard sort of interrupts the flow of the narrative to have a long essay on the childhood of Hitler and then what led up to sort of the horrors of the Holocaust. And I remember just reading his description of the sort of the poetry that came out of the Holocaust and these long hours spent mulling over on his end how this could happen. And I don't think I've ever had an experience like that, because there was once at 3 a.m. reading it where I found myself just staring into this picture I found on Google of the concentration camps and imagining what it would be like to have my friends and family be there, and looking at their faces and seeing human faces that I almost recognize as people that I know. Damn, it's a good book. Who is Knausgaard? Knausgaard is a Norwegian writer. This beautiful man behind me here, I don't know if you can see his face or not. He looks like he's kind of got a glow, an angelic glow. Speaking of angels, his first book was about angels. And this new book is about the devil. It's about the devil. So Knausgaard got critically acclaimed across the world, basically after releasing his 6-volume series of autofiction titled My Struggle, Mein Kampf, which, as many of you know, Mein Kampf is the name of Hitler's book, and that is intentional. My Struggle was met with a lot of mixed reviews, but I think for the most part it was a lot of praise, just because of how controversial it was for him to sort of like just share all of this stuff about his life and not give a damn about what his family thought. The first book, A Death in the Family, is really just about his dad dying and his dad being sort of an abusive father that he grew up under. And it's kind of about him burying his father and cleaning out the house that his father died in. this picture actually doesn't quite. It's not accurate. Like this is Knausgaard when he was writing My Struggle, which is quite a while ago now. I think he started them 2011 maybe. So he looks quite different. But this is the Knausgaard that sort of got in my head. There's a really cool Vice documentary on YouTube that you can go watch, where he's in the pub with a Vice interviewer, and he has this sort of brooding, melancholic, rock star writer kind of look to him. And that's the one that has been ingrained in my head. This kind of idea of the writer who's, he's looking off into the distance, into the fjords of Norway, contemplating about the meaning of life. And I love it. I love it. I love it. So, A Morning Star is a little bit different than My Struggle in that it's his triumphant return to fiction, as a lot of critics are saying. But what I think really separates The Morning Star from Knausgaard's earlier fiction, especially My Struggle, is that it takes place between 9 different parallel narratives. There's 9 different characters that he sort of jumps between the entire novel all the way through. And this has its up and downs about it. Like there's some positive aspects of this. One of them being that you really get a wide array of interpretations of this morning star that happens, which I should probably just tell you what the book's about at this point. The Morning Star is about basically modern day Norway, and it's about this massive planet, or this supernova, as some people think it is, that appears really close to the Earth, and it starts to, startle people and kind of stir up different interpretations, and weird things start to happen. So some people hallucinate fire, things on fire, burning up. Some people start to hallucinate weird creatures with ox-like heads, with a braid down the back, kind of Viking kind of descriptions of sort of the demonic. There's different characters who have different kinds of takes on this. So there's a character named Eagle, who is a theologian, sort of an amateur theologian who speculates about God, who quotes Kierkegaard and Nietzsche a lot. And so he thinks that, okay, this might be a sort of theological sign. So he says that the morning star in the Bible is number one, a name for Lucifer. Lucifer, that's Satan. His name means the morning star. Whereas Jesus also says, I am the bright and morning star. So is it God? Is it the devil? Is it a good omen? Is it a bad omen? How do I figure this out? You still get these really amazing descriptions of Norway, which you get also in My Struggle, these kind of long meditations on nature, on time, on memory, which a lot of people have made the kind of reference or association between Knausgaard and Marcel Proust, who was a French writer in the beginning of the 20th century, who also did that kind of stylistic writing of back and forth with memory, with time, loss, death, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to read a passage that really exemplifies this type of... A heavy log had washed up a few meters below the last line of trees. It looked like it had been in the sea for a long time. I passed my hand over its surface. It was completely smooth, and had not yet begun to rot. I sat down on it, lit a cigarette, and stared out at the sea. It was calm, and my gaze was drawn to the point where it dissolved into the thick, velvety darkness that rose up above the world like a bell jar. A darkness in which light shone through the tiniest holes. At least, that was how the madman Strindberg had construed it. I thought to myself, and gulped a swig from the whiskey bottle. Like Knausgaard's first, I guess it's not his first novel, but his first English translated novel, A Time for Everything, The Morning Star is magical realist. It's sort of, there's these sort of magical, supernatural things that are happening in a world that is also a very realistic world where there's a lot of detail, a lot of time put into the personal, intimate qualities of mundane, quotidian existence. Some characters sort of take on a more maybe rational, what we would consider a rational opinion about the star, the morning star, and they kind of consider it maybe a natural scientific phenomena that can be explained through logic and through science. And whereas I think the book really opens up this question of what does it mean to be rational? And I think it really asks the question of, is it the fact that we know what we see, or perhaps is it that we see what we know? Another way of putting this is, am I looking at the world and interpreting things through what I already preconceived to be true? Is there just like these sort of filtered categories that I'm interpreting everything through? Or is what I'm experiencing really what I'm experiencing? Is it a matter of me just interpreting, what I'm experiencing to be true, and it's not really true in itself, in its essence? And so the questions this book bring up are really about how we interpret reality and the nature of reality. Perhaps it's the case that what we think is rational, what we think is logical, is really just this sort of pent-up custom, or these conventions that we've sort of identified with for hundreds or thousands of years that have just become truth. Maybe these ideas that we think are true are really just patterns or habits that have become what we think reality is. Mum had told me that towards the end of his life, my grandfather, on seeing the politician Joe Benkow on the news, had suddenly said, "What's that damn Jew doing on my television?" She'd been appalled. Her father had never before expressed anti-Semitism, nor any other form of racism. Had he held such views all along, but kept them to himself, knowing them to be stigmatizing, only for them to escape him after he had become old and begun to lose his bearings? Was it the case that such ideas, with all the prejudice they contained, had been held for so long as to become a part of our fabric, even though we had not conceived them ourselves? Was that why they were so difficult to break down, why new ideas were so infrequent and met with such resistance? But when first conceived, they would occur again, over and over, until they too became galvanized by habit, if not to become laws, then at least possible truths. I also found myself creeped out multiple times, reading this up to 2, 3 in the morning. The lights are kind of dim in my apartment. I've lit some candles. We're approaching Halloween. It's, outside it's a dark and gloomy Edinburgh, and it's, this kind of ambiance of the spooky. And so I think one of the things that Knausgaard does really well is that sort of slow burn of suspense, the kind of creeping feeling that there's a presence in the room that maybe is unsettling and maybe shouldn't be there. And I think that is also something that he did in A Time for Everything, where he was recapitulating the story of Noah from the Bible and the flood narrative, and the flood sort of slowly creeps higher and higher and higher until, the tragedy of the flood. So that really is something to look forward to, especially in the sense that this genre could be considered a theological thriller. It could be considered philosophical, horror. And it's something I haven't really come across before so much. I'd say the book is really, at the bottom line, it's about how we just can't, even though we've progressed so much as a society, and civilization, claims to be this really evolved, we've kind of reached the zenith of the pinnacle of what we are. We're still in some ways very primitive, and we're still in some ways still in the unknown, especially when it comes to things like death. We don't know what happens when we die. That's a big thing. We think we know that nothing happens, but we can't prove that nothing happens. And so a big part of the book is, Knausgaard uses this, not Knausgaard, Eagle, a very Knausgaard-like character, has a long essay at the very end of the book about death and dying, which is kind of a creative way to end the book, where he uses an example of a person who has lost a key, and it's nighttime, and there's a spotlight shining a light, and the person's searching for the key underneath the spotlight, and somebody approaches them and says, "You've lost your key. Have you lost it under the spotlight?" And they say, No, I've lost it over there in the darkness. but I can't see anything over there, so I'm just going to look in this one circle of light. And so Eagle says, this is exactly how we treat anything that sort of rings of the irrational, anything like dreams or death or sort of illogical experiences that we might intake. And so basically what we're doing when we think about death and when we're trying to rationalize about death is we're looking in the one circle of light we call science, we call religion, we call whatever it might be. But death is the circumference of that bleeds out into darkness, into a darkness that we have no idea the origins of it. A couple of things I think really didn't line up for me reading this book, and they were probably just more a personal taste thing, was that it felt at times like Knausgaard was kind of going for the mass appeal. It was kind of a little bit of reading, I don't want to say pulpy, but it felt a little pulpy, like just underbaked characters. Even though I'm telling you that the characters were so incredibly, the time that he took to make each one it's absolutely amazing. But they start to either sound a little too much like Knausgaard, which necessarily is not a bad thing. It's just that maybe he writes from his own viewpoint, and so that's what comes out. But you have a couple characters, specifically Eagle and what's the other character's name? So Arn. Eagle and Arn are kind of both these Knausgaardian characters. They both kind of, struggle with alcoholism. They both kind of smoke a lot. They both are very introspective. They both kind of have family issues. It's hard not to read certain scenarios in the book without thinking about maybe some events that happened in my struggle. And that is just going to be probably something that might haunt all of Knausgaard's future literature. That's just how it is. I think that's just how it is. It's maybe too bad. Final consensus is this was a fantastic book. While it might have some shortcomings that I've already mentioned, I think that Knausgaard did a really good job of transitioning out of autofiction back into fiction. This is not a standalone book, but it's actually going to be a part of a larger series that's coming out. And so I'm looking forward to reading whatever Knausgaard has in store for the future of the Morning Star series. Knausgaard's also really well known for his love of music and his writing. So in My Struggle, he talks about playing in a band as a kid and how music was always sort of a part of his inspiration for writing. And that really shines through in The Morning Star, where you get references to the Eurythmics, to Beach House, to Bowie, to maybe even more contemporary pop artists like Coldplay, Ariana Grande. Billie Eilish is mentioned at one point. I know that somebody's already compiled a playlist on Spotify that I saw, which is all of the songs that are mentioned in The Morning Star. Might be worth checking out as you read the book. Listen to the playlist. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to 1,000 Lives Book Reviews. If you have read any Knausgaard, please share your opinions in the comments below. If you are curious about reading a Knausgaard book, let me know which one. Maybe we can have a conversation about it. Also, let me know what your favorite Knausgaard book is and other books that you'd be interested in me reviewing on this channel. Thanks, guys. Bye.